Well, we'll go ahead and get started. Still morning, good morning. Even though it feels like in some ways it's 4 o'clock in the afternoon already, good morning. Welcome to our second to last of our 2030 video series. Today's presentation is on operations and maintenance and commissioning. I'm pleased to welcome Tony Pierbolt and Nate Van Oeklum. I hope I said that right.
Pretty close.
Okay. From GMB, they'll be available at the end. They have prepared a few things and also available for questions and dialogue after. The learning objectives explain the benefits of monitoring, evaluation, and education to design firms, clients, and building occupants. Understand the role of the commissioning agent in all phases of the design process and into operations. Explain and advocate for commissioning on projects, and instruct building operations and maintenance staff in optimizing building performance. As always, thanks to our sponsors, both as a chapter and as a committee. We couldn't do the work that we do without their support. As many of you have been on here, you've seen this before, so I won't spend too much time on it, but why do we care about reducing the carbon footprint and energy use in our buildings? Buildings account for 40% of the greenhouse gas emissions that come from the built environment. And so that's a pretty big impact and responsibility on our part. So the 2030 challenge again was issued in 2006, asking design firms in the building community to reach a carbon neutral, net zero energy building standard by 2030. Process, you can create an account on the Design Data Exchange, sign and upload the commitment, create an sustainability action plan, and then report projects on the DDX. Again, it's my JFK quote about going to the moon. If you haven't watched the video, he's got the hard Boston accent, so it's a good thing to visit, especially if you're into history. Building on sort of last 2 weeks ago now, our presentation then, sort of laying the foundation of something that we as architects have direct control over, but also as technology and these things become more complicated, we are starting to see things like LEED require even envelope commissioning to reach certain point thresholds there. And some of that, and what's related to this quote is that ideally the building envelope and the actual building itself that we construct now is probably the longest lasting piece of our projects. I was at an event and had a little bit of pushback from an owner on owners don't replace HVAC systems in 10 to 25 years, nor do they replace lighting systems. And I understand their point, but the point of this wasn't to make people feel bad. It was just to lay out the foundation that a lot of the buildings we see today were built decades ago and have been updated. So it's a good first step to tackle load reductions in terms of energy use and as it relates to using existing buildings, carbon. So it's a good first place to start. With that, I'll get into the video just so we can maximize our time at the end here for Tony and Nate, as well as some dialogue. I will say it helps the bandwidth if everybody has their camera off. It's about an hour, so we'll get started. All right. I want to turn it over to Tony and Nate. I guess this is sort of fluid. It's our discussion and dialogue time. And so I guess maybe before I turn it over to Tony and Nate, I'll first put it to the floor if there's any questions. And if not, then Tony, I'll let you guys take it away. I didn't see any in the chat.
Yeah, I mean, I think we'd rather, if there's some questions or conversation to be had, we'd rather just kind of have some of that. We can share some information, some slides too, but some of it's going to be a little redundant probably with what was in the video, which is, they had a lot of good stuff there. So I'm curious on others' experience here with commissioning and blend performance and what they've seen in some of their projects.
I know I've only, I guess, dabbled in lead projects. But I have had experience with envelope commissioning in particular. It did strike me, and I guess this would be a question and maybe how you guys have handled it in your experience. They mentioned, how's the engineer going to feel? And in my head, I go, how's the architect going to feel when someone's pointing out their flaws? And I think maybe that's my gut reaction was, yeah, it's thinking about who the team, right? You're working for the owner ultimately, and you want the best project. But I've been there where I'm like, oh shoot, like, yeah, I forgot to do this, or oh man, like you sort of get defensive a little bit. But I think my lesson learned there was, well, it's about learning and continuous improvement, right? But I don't know if you guys have had good or bad experiences with that, that you can share, or how have members of the design team that maybe haven't had experience with commissioning agents, how have they responded and what's been the feedback?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think it obviously depends a lot on how commissioning is achieved on the project. So I don't know, a lot of times we see that it happens more like, after the design is done and people are just trying to get it included at the end.
Right.
But yeah, if you're doing it the way that's better and the way they talk about in the video where they're kind of included at the beginning, then ideally they're helping do some design review at your issuances, probably giving you comments. And I have gotten those comments before. And if you can be egotistical about it or be like irritated by it, but like it's also, again, you're on the same team. I had for sure have every time that's happened gotten good comments or made improvements that makes the project better. So like you just kind of got to view it from that perspective. And it doesn't necessarily always have to be in front of the owner either. Like usually it can be like a shared document that's like, hey, read your plans, here's some comments, and you can respond to that and go through that. So yeah, just the team approach. It's always helpful to have another set of eyes. So
I actually got to see this firsthand. I think it was Nate. It was Nate or Trent, another mechanical engineer, and we had an outside commissioning agent ask about some design parameters almost combatively, and they ran it past me just to get my input on it, and I went, wow, okay, that's kind of direct question compared to the design. And I think in that case, the mechanical engineer had considered more than the commissioning agent had. He had taken one section of it and said, this is not correct. But in the larger context, it was. So it was interesting to watch the mechanical engineer designer response to that. And you do have to kind of swallow and go, well, you might better consider that. I think that it'd be very interesting to see if any of you have had experience with commissioning the way it's supposed to be. And Nate talked about this too, but I would love it if it started with the owner's project requirement, document. If we could put an OPR before instead of later. It seems like it's the commissioning agent's duty to put that together long after the design is done and the basis design, and kind of discover that, just to tick those boxes. And we don't like to tick boxes. We want we want this process to be a positive one, and one that actually has some value instead of just running through, and checking boxes. So anyway, just a quick question: has any of you encountered commissioning maybe the way it should have been, or maybe in other ways that were more negative?
Hi, Tony. I'm Sean Costello with Deacon Ammon. I actually used to work in Indianapolis and did a passive house project, and we had an OPR and building requirements at the beginning of design, which was kind of nice because of passive house. And so we got to go through like the whole process of the blower door test and everything, and it was really awesome. I mean, the clients were definitely on board, so it was a really positive process, and luckily we passed, which was always, a little tense at the moment. But it was pretty cool because we had to have essentially the contractor, the architect, and the engineers essentially all on board at the same time, because we all needed to get the the blower door test to pass essentially. So that was kind of a nice experience.
I think the closest I've come is we had a higher education client who had done a couple lead projects, and so they copy and pasted their OPR and BOD from the last job. So it was like, it felt like 50% of the way was right. Like, okay, good, we're talking about it, but hey, where's the commissioning agent? Like,
Right.
oh, we'll hire them in a few weeks. It's like, no, let's get them in here. Because did you vet that what you did for the last 3 projects actually worked? So I've also seen it, I've seen it not as formalized, I guess. Everybody was involved, but I don't know that I would say the process wasn't traditional. It was more that the team lead, the project manager, was just being forward with everyone and sort of documenting the desires and wishes of the owner, things they were hearing and programming, and sort of turning that into an OPR. But still not 100% the way everybody says it should happen and lead says it should happen.
And in some ways, it gets a little bit too prescriptive when you pull up the ASHRAE, flow chart. It's got 55 bubbles of like how to do commissioning, right? But like,
Yeah,
you throw that OPR to the owner, and they're like, "Why am I looking at this?" Then it's not commonplace enough for them to really even know what it is sometimes. So yeah, it's kind of got to be flexible. I think it works fine. It's still just as long as you're getting the information and like they say the whole video, like your expectations are getting set, and we're all knowing what you want, then that's going in the right direction.
I will say it's been helpful having been through a project that had commissioning involved. It does, in a different way, teach you the questions to ask at the beginning. So I've had lots of projects that don't have commissioning involved, but I know things to ask now. And I think that's what can be beneficial, is dealing with the reality of things. Some owners just aren't going to do X, Y, and Z, right? But I think collectively we can all benefit from those experiences. And again, it's about raising the bar and meeting an owner's objectives. Like I can go to a mechanical and be like, hey, I may not know the ins and outs of the system and all the inputs that go to designing it, but I know to ask a couple questions to get higher performance and better outcomes for an owner. So, and I think a lot of that comes as a direct result of being involved with commissioning agents in the past. So,
Yeah, I was thinking of a couple more things that I would, I guess, stress for the group is somewhat like, one, the Michigan Energy Code generally requires commissioning on most projects, like basically over 10,000 square feet, you're supposed to have it. And that makes a lot of sense because like the systems that get designed and put in the buildings today are not simple and they're complicated and like they don't get installed right 95% of the time. So it needs to get commissioned and tested and corrected and issues logs created and checked in with the engineer, and all of that process kind of needs to happen. And I think that's so all of us kind of need to be on the same page from the standpoint of like educating and informing our owners of like, hey, like this is good. You need this. It's going to pay off, like they were saying in the video, in 1 to 4 years. 4 years for a new builder. They said 1 year for a rental, but it's not as simple as plug and play. And controls contractors are iffy sometimes, and all that good stuff, right? So,
do you find that commissioning is happening on projects greater than 10,000 square feet?
on our projects, yes, it's happening. Is it happening well?
Right.
Not always.
We were just discussing a bid we got that it's too low, and we're getting bids that are just really all over the map, and we understand that low bid, like any low bid, is if it's scary low, like anything, it's going to be suspect. And yeah, it is being done most of the time. Smaller projects are definitely not, and they should be under code. They should be. So yeah, and it's funny because we understand that's just one tool in the box. We understand that from our point of view on finishing a building, it's a big tool and a very important one, and one that requires quite a diligence to look at the really almost hyper detail. Somebody's got to look at it. And
Right.
you hope the control guy is going to, but I'm literally standing next to a control guy as we went from unit to unit to unit one day, and I opened up the unit and there's the damper actuator hanging from the shaft. It hadn't been tightened down, and I don't know, for the 15th time the engineer said, oh yeah, we were going to come back to that. Yeah, that one didn't fit. So we hung it there, with the idea of coming back. Oh yeah,
that times 100, and there you go. Yeah, long list.
So that was and then other times, we went unit to unit to unit, and we ran right through it, very smooth. But then all of a sudden, one component isn't working, and we would find it eventually, but it could take a couple years of wondering why we couldn't cool it, or it was stuffy, or pressures were wrong, or something to that effect. So that hyper detail, somebody's got to look at it, because otherwise we're all assuming that it operates the way it was designed. And that is yeah, I don't know if it's 95%, but it might be. I came from a contracting background, so I did most of the temperature control systems. I hope it wasn't that high, but probably pretty close. So.
Yeah.
The other thing that I wanted to kind of throw up too was, that having that throughout the process of even pre-design, and I love the idea of having that design charrette having a focus of operation. That's how I heard it, at least, and maybe you guys heard it differently, but having that operation and focus on sustainability and on continuous, maybe commissioning, but at least a continuous process to operate the building the way it was designed, We have found that I was online with a system this morning that we're doing the commissioning with, and I found 2 units that are running 24/7. Why? The owner said it that way. We don't know why. So it's designed to a certain parameter, but then the owner chose to operate these 2 units in that 24 hours a day. So the small things can add up quite quickly, and I thought it was kind of neat to have that up front. I haven't been involved in the design charrette, but I think it would be neat to have that idea come through with the operational people too.
Yeah. Well, we're getting up to the end of the hour. I want to thank Tony and Nate for their time and insights today. I know as we're starting to build out our programming for 2022, I'm having conversations with these guys to see what can we do to build on this and get something a little more local, maybe in person eventually, that can dive into the benefits of commissioning and share more of these experiences from the local market. So I want to thank you both for your time today. I think this will work. So as always, I ask if your firm will be signing the 2030 commitment today. In addition to letting us here at COTE know how we can help you, if you do sign on, we'd like to know, just so we can start to identify people that are signed on and be able to reach out and tailor resources to supporting that work. A couple of resources that you can check out, particularly related to some of what was mentioned in the video and our discussion today. The AIA has a couple documents: the Guide to Building Performance, the Primer on Renewable Energy. They just released, and I'll make sure to include it next week, a 3-part embodied carbon guideline document. And all of these dabble in sort of that same, how do we reduce energy use? How do we implement renewable energy? How do we energy model? They're all great resources. In addition to the 2030 palette, which has sort of the high level strategies that you could implement in your projects and when the right time to implement is. And then next week is our last session from this series, achieving the 2030 goals on the project and in the office. And then we'll take a little bit of time off and hopefully be back in 2022. If anyone is interested as well, on Thursday, we have a COTE committee planning meeting where we'll be talking about 2022 programming. So if you have any ideas or needs and wants, or want to champion something and host one of these presentations, please be there. That's at 12:30. And you can register through email links or reaching out to me or Matt. So with that, thanks everyone for your time. Have a good rest of the week.
Thanks.
Thank you.